Welcome and Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And I'm going to go ahead and share the screen now. And we are, as you can see, on the Parsha of Bahar. That's right over here. And very often Bahar and the very last Parsha of Leviticus are combined, and they are in fact combined this year too. So we won't be doing the Chukotai unless we happen to finish Bahar this coming week and go on to the Chukotai. So they're relatively short passages, but right now we are in Bahar. And what's interesting is that Bahar deals with a subject that doesn't seem to fit into Leviticus at all, and that is the idea of land and ownership of land. And one of the things that comes out of, and it's stated actually explicitly in the Torah, is that we don't own land, and the Israelites did not own the land. The land belonged to God, and we are, in a sense, renters on that land. And that's why God is able to make the rules, and why when we sell fields, they're sold as harvests and not until the Jubilee year, and they are not generally sold in perpetuity. But the last time we had met last year, we had discussed a circumstance where a house or some other property might be sold in perpetuity. And here we are. And if your brother becomes poor, in other words, his circumstances fall, they go low, they become low. Umata yado imach. And literally, this is an idiom, right? And it literally means his hand comes below with you, under you, perhaps. And the way Safaria translates it was, and comes under your authority. V'chazak dabo, right? And you shall hold him. Ger v'toshav. This sentence is quite convoluted and difficult to understand, or certainly to translate literally, right? But at least you shall take hold of him. Ger v'toshav. Ger is someone who becomes Jewish, who becomes an Israelite, takes on the practices of an Israelite. V'toshav is translated as a resident alien. Rashi is going to help us understand the distinction between a ger and a toshav. The toshav has that idea of a resident, yashav, to dwell, right? V'chai imach, and lives with you. Lives with you. So here we go. V'hechezakta bo. So this is based on the Sifra here, that where Rashi is getting this comment. Al tanichehu, do not leave him alone, do not desist from him, do not allow him, sheyered ve'yipol, that he should go down and fall. In other words, that his circumstances should become abject. Vayeh kasher lahakimo, so that it is very hard to lift him up. In other words, he gets into such straits, into such debt, etc., that it now becomes very, very difficult to relieve him of that kind of debt. Ella, however, chaskehu. So they're understanding this, of course, in a way that interprets these words almost as individual words. Make him strong, strengthen him. Misha'at motet hayad, from the moment his hand falters. In other words, when you see him starting to get into trouble, financially is the situation here. Lama zedome, how can this be compared? How would we compare this? Lemasui, to a burden, she'al hachamor, which is on a donkey, like a burden on a donkey, odehu al hachamor, as long as this burden is still on the donkey, echad tofesbo, one person can grab hold of it, uma'amido, and can set it back on its position. Nafal la'aretz, however, if this burden falls down to the ground, chamisha ein ma'amidimoto, 5 people aren't able to get it back to where it was. So interesting idea here. And so what's happening here, and we see this in general from where we started, about the notion of social justice and social equity, the need for equity. And what's so lovely is the idea that these kinds of rules of society, to try to create a society where people are treated fairly and with equity, is alongside so many laws involving ritual purity and sacrifices and the needs of the Kohanim to be punctilious about maintaining their spiritual purity and stuff like that, and that there is no distinction, right? That these are all part of the same idea, that spiritual purity also involves social justice. It isn't divorced from it. And I think that's the reason why we wind up at the end, towards the end of the book of Leviticus, with these statements here. So, ger v'toshav, here we are, ger v'toshav, right? And an alien and a resident alien. Af im hu ger o toshav. Even, in other words, even if he's not your brother, even if he isn't a born Jewish person or a born Israelite, right? Even if he's adopted Israel, becoming an Israelite. Ve'ezuhu toshav. So the question is, how do we understand this term toshav? What's its distinction? So ger is someone who takes upon themselves all the commandments that are incumbent on the Jewish people. But a toshav is kol shekibel alav shelo la'avod avodat elilim. Here we're talking about someone who has accepted upon himself the responsibility not to serve idols. In other words, he's given up the practice of idolatry, the ochel nevelot. However, he still eats unkosher food. In other words, he has adopted the most fundamental belief within Judaism, but there are particulars which he has not given up. Now, to some extent, of course, this describes many other religions. And this would be a supportive phrase here, right, to describe religions that essentially maintain a monotheistic belief. Sorry, okay. I don't know if you heard that. I'm sorry. I need to turn off my phone. 1 second. Sorry. Okay, let's go on.
No need to apologize.
Siri is very busy. Sorry about that. Let me see what I can do about that. There we go. All right. Got it on Do Not Disturb. Okay. Well, that's part of the reality of doing this here. So going on. Al tikach. Now, this is a very interesting mitzvah here. Do not take me'ito, from him, neshech v'tarbit. Neshech is interest. Tarbit possibly means compound interest. V'yareta melohecha, but you shall fear your God, v'che achicha imach, that your brother should live alongside of you. Now, I know that one of the things that happened, especially during the Middle Ages, is that, that Jews were involved in finance and in lending to non-Jews, and understanding this phrase as meaning that it's okay to lend at interest. Now, there are other verses in Deuteronomy that would seem to allow for that. But the truth is, the fact, at least the way I'm seeing it, is the fact that this verse immediately followed the issue of ger and toshav, and the way we define toshav is so interesting that it may apply to people who have not officially adopted Judaism, let's say, but nevertheless have adopted the idea of belief in one ultimate, existent, transcendent being, would also put them in this category as well, at least in my humble opinion. So let's go on and see this. So these ideas, by the way, are developed very deeply in terms of what we mean by charging interest, and that there are very severe laws and very rigorous laws against the idea of charging any kind of interest, not necessarily in terms of dollars and cents, but in terms of food or other benefits that attach themselves to lending something. And I suspect that part of this is also consistent with the idea that we don't really own anything, that we ourselves are gerim v'toshavim in this world. So neshech v'tarbit, right? Interest, and we'll translate it as compound interest. L'rabot, okay, so it means sort of to multiply. That's why I'm translating it as compound interest. Chad shavinhu rabbanin. So it says our rabbis, our sages, equate the two. They're saying they're both the same thing. And so the reason why it doesn't say neshech, or it doesn't just say tabit, why it says both, is to now make sure that this has a double negative commandment, a double prohibition on it. And we'll see why in a moment, as we see, V'yareta me'elohecha, but you shall fear your God. Why is this? What is this got to do with it? This law, why is this added on here? Lefi shidda'ato, the reason is that it is our habit, it's in our minds, shel adam nimshechet achar haribit, right? Because it is human nature, is what he's saying, to be drawn towards charging interest. That charging interest is not only sort of a business matter, but is also the very nature of human beings to want some favor for a favor. And he's saying, and it's very difficult to separate yourself from, or to give up this particular tendency, this inclination. Or more and in doing this, in seeking ways in which to get away with charging interest, right? He decides for himself. Morela more means as if it was a halachic ruling. He says, it's halachically permissible, heter, a permission, bishvil ma'otav, on account of his money, shehayu betelot etzlo, that were being unused for any other purpose, right? So he has obviously this money available to lend out, right? And he wants that money to make money, right? And for this reason, because it is the very nature of human beings to want to gain some sort of favor for lending money, right? Doing this, it was necessary for the verse to say, "V'yareta me'elohecha," you shall fear God. And here we go, right? In other words, that your respect for God should be such that you overpower this inclination of yours to charge interest, some kind of interest. And this is from Baba Metzia, page 62. Or another situation, Hatole ma'otav benochri, one who assigns his money to a Gentile, kedei lahalvotam, so as to lend that money, right? To lend that money, the Yisrael beribit, to a a fellow Jewish person using interest. In other words, this prohibition is assigned to Jews. We're told explicitly not to lend other Jews money at interest. And so what you do is you assign the money to a non-Jew, and since a non-Jew isn't forbidden, he doesn't come under this particular law, that way the money can be lent at interest, and you've sort of created a ruse to be able to do this. Hare ze davar hamasur lelibo shel adam. He says, doing things in this particular way, using a ruse, is something that no other person needs to or might be able to detect, that we can't read other people's minds as to what they're doing. Umachshavato. You can't say what's in a person's heart. Okay, this is something that is in a person's heart or in his thoughts. And for this reason, it says, so you shall fear your God. And this again would support what I have tried to explain, that the idea of being God-fearing means that you're the kind of person who, even if no one else would know that you are doing something inappropriate, you still wouldn't do it. It isn't what can I get away with, which of course is unfortunately an attitude out there. So et kaspacha lo titen lo. Sorry, let's go on with this. You shall not give your money to him beneshech, with an interest, and not only when it comes to money, uve marbit, right? And again, this is sort of, you can't call this compound interest, right? But you could have to say, some kind of benefit back to you. Lo titin och lecha. You shall not give him your food, right? If this is a person clearly who's facing poverty, and you're in a position to help this person out, you shouldn't take advantage of someone who is in unfortunate circumstances. And of course, this is also consistent with the laws that this Parsha started off with about the sabbatical year. Okay. And here are additional statements supporting the reason for God being able to tell us these things and to demand them of us. Ani Hashem Elokechem, I am the Lord your Elohim. Right, and this is the idea of this is describing God's transcendency, right? And the Elohim is the part that has that God has that right, or we take upon ourselves the willingness to observe divine commandments, to sense that we're commanded. Asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, latet lachem et eretz Canaan, in order to give you the land of Canaan, liot lachem, to be to you, Elohim, as your Elohim, right, as the one to whom you owe respect and allegiance and loyalty. Rashi. Asher hotzeti v'gomer, who brought you out, etc. Vehivchanti ben bechor l'shenei bechor, and when I did that, I was able to determine who was a bechor, who was a firstborn son, l'sheino bechor, from the one who wasn't a firstborn son. Af ani yodea, and just as I know, as I was aware of who was the firstborn son and who wasn't the firstborn son, right? Because obviously that may not be so obvious. Af ani yodea v'nifra min hamalveh ha'ot l'Yisrael beribit. So too, I know and will extract revenge, okay, or at least hold accountable from the one who lends money to an Israelite with interest. So you can see this sounds like a venial issue, but it's not a venial issue, at least according to the Torah. And in some ways, of course, you might pause for a moment and wonder what society would be like if there wasn't so much interest being charged and stuff like that. And if people who needed the money were able to find the financial resources to do that. Golda.
Yeah, well, this is kind of what got us into trouble in the Middle Ages.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Because the Christians took it the same way, that they
Mhm.
could not lend money
Right,
to other
right,
Christians
right, right.
with interest. So they weren't lending anybody money.
Correct.
Exactly.
Which is exactly the point that Rashi is making as to how much people don't want to lend their money for nothing. They don't.
Right.
No, no.
You know what? In my family, I've always said when I give somebody money, it's like, no, you don't even have to pay me back. But two, if you do, there is no interest. That's ridiculous.
Right,
Because if I have it, I am willing and able and want to give it and to
right.
help you. Right.
Yes.
And we
However,
should be like that. But,
so Golda, let me say this. I think though that there is this distinction between giving the money outright and lending it and and holding the person accountable to give it back. To just simply
yes, I
give
do
back.
understand that.
And I think there's a matter of human dignity involved, and that's what the Torah is talking about. It isn't saying support that person without any expectation to be paid back, but you can make the terms of that payback such that the person is can become, to get in a position to be able to do that. And being able to pay back a loan is a great burden lifted. So let me finish up the Rashi and the
Okay.
text that we have there. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
No, thank you. Thank you. Okay. Uh okay, let me go on. All right. Right. So it says, and will extract or hold accountable the one who lends money to an Israelite with interest, the Omer shel nochrihem, and claim that that money that he lent was actually belonged to a Gentile, and therefore it was justifiable for him to do that, and legal. Davar acher, another interpretation. Asher hotzaiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, almanat, for the sake, right? So that shetikablu alechem mitzvotai, so that you would accept your mitzvot upon yourselves, your commandments. I would accept my commandments upon you, that you would do that. Afilu hen kvedot alechem, even if they are a burden to you, that you'd be willing to do that because of coming out of the terrible situation, the burdens of slavery in Egypt. And of course, I hold very strongly now that there's a contemporary application of that, because we all experience various kinds of slavery, including when we're addicted to something. And addiction is without any question a form of slavery. And that we really do need God to help us be able to come out of that. So, Latet lachem et eretz Canaan. This is also a very interesting statement here, right? To give to you the land of Canaan, bischar shetikablu mitzvotai, as a reward, right? As payment for accepting upon yourselves my commandments. So again, this sort of goes back to Golda, to what I was saying before, that there's a great sense of honor and dignity in not just wanting free gifts, not wanting handouts, but to earn these things. Yes, Lauren.
How does this kind of not delegitimize our claim on Israel, because the greater percentage of Jews are not observant, and in
Right,
Israel as well as here,
right.
and and so how does this? It says that this is it's
Yeah,
kind of a condition.
right.
So how, if that condition is unmet, how do we have that claim?
I agree. Can I hold a question just so that I finish the Rashi and then hopefully still have a little time to do that? Okay. Yes, I actually have given that question some thought, right? So, liot lachem, just to finish this up, Elohim, right, as your God, right, your Elohim. So this is a bin from the Sifra. Shekol Hadar Be'eretz Yisrael, because anyone who lives in the land of Israel, Ani lo Elohim, if you part of accepting God as your God is actually living in the land of Israel, V'chol hayotze mimenu, and anyone who leaves it, ke'oved avodat elilim, it's as if they are serving idols. Now, I think I need to explain that. We didn't have a choice initially, right? When we were thrown into exile, it wasn't a free choice to leave Israel. We were forced to do that. But let me go back to your question, Lauren, and say, yes, I have.
Well, as far as what you just said, though,
Mhm.
um, it was a mixed bag. There were many people who left for economic reasons willingly, and there were some who were forced out, and there were some who stayed. Who they weren't forced out in a way that was a final force. I mean, there were always people who stayed and endured some hardships from no longer, having rights to the land in the same way. But I'm just saying that there was a mixed bag of people who left willingly, who left because of the hardships of expulsion, and who actually stayed.
We know that the Romans called it Palestine and not Judea, just to delegitimize any Jewish, any
But
Jewish.
not all the Jews left,
No, not all the Jews left, but it was a
and
very
some Jews had already left willingly.
yes, and that is in fact the book of Ruth, and that's the book of Ruth talks about you know Machlon and Kilion and Naomi's husband. I don't know if its name's, forgive me, Elkanah maybe, uh, that they left willingly and were punished accordingly, because there was drought there, and he was a leader of the community, and he was set a very poor example for everyone else. But I don't want to get too off the topic that you raised. Okay, so look, I'm not Orthodox, and I suspect that were you to speak to Orthodox people who hold on to the idea that the land of Israel only belongs to someone who is an observant Jewish individual, I'm not going to represent them, because my sense is that the that the land is there with the idea that we live lives of equity and kindness and devotion to practicing mitzvot, not in an arrogant kind of way, and that we reach out to the people, especially people who were living there for generations and generations, and who in fact also believe in one God, and that we should find ways in which to share this wonderful portion that we have in the land of Israel. So I
But
would,
the fact that we don't do that,
yes,
why
yes,
doesn't that delegitimize? Because there are criminals, there's organized crime, there are lots and lots of people who are just secular, and some of them are amoral,
yes.
and some of them are immoral, and some religious people are immoral who are kind of Torah Jews. And I'm just saying that, we're not, as a consensus, accepting God's word. So
I,
why do we,
I don't.
if seems to be a contingency?
Well, I could say two things. One is, yes, it worries me too. Okay, it concerns me greatly as well, although I don't live there. Okay, I'm living in a paradise outside the land of Israel, and I agree with you, and again, and secondly, part of the people who you're talking about who want to lay claim like that, well, that's part of the evil involved in the attitude that they have, and not, some, of course, many people, I think, are not evil. They are ignorant, perhaps. That's a problem. If you don't study Torah, you never come across these kinds of things, and so these things aren't things you even think about, and you tend to think more in terms of nationalistic values and stuff like that. And I hate to say it, but I think nationalism itself is a type of idolatry. So yeah, I mean, it's a great concern, and we have to hope that God will, in fact, perhaps turn people's hearts. It's what we're talking about in the Aleinu, or every time we say Kaddish, that's what we're hoping for. And I think that's because it's recognized that, we haven't always by any means deserved this blessing that we have and our claim to the land. It's based on living laws of equity and purity and trying to serve God, and that the land of Israel provides that unique opportunity. But people don't necessarily see that as the purpose of living.
But it's kind of paradoxical then to use terms like holy people, holy land, or even holy language, because this, it's not like maybe there's potential holiness, but people curse in Hebrew and people commit crimes in Hebrew and in Israel, and people are who are born Jewish are not all separating themselves to honor God, and they're it's potential, I guess. I
Oh,
mean, everything is potential, in terms of some kind of utopian ethical
okay. So
future, but
I think
I,
it's also keeping a hope alive, right? There's one thing worse than hypocrisy, and that's when you claim that this horrible thing that you're doing is actually legitimate. And by the way, we're living in times like that. So there's worse things than being a hypocrite, because my understanding of hypocrisy is, this is a wrong thing to do, but you yourself are in fact being tempted to do it and occasionally give in to that temptation. And that's being a hypocrite. But people don't understand there's something worse than hypocrisy. And hypocrisy in some ways represents a struggle to try to maintain these values and recognize that, we're not real strong about it. I'm going to stop the share right now, but yeah, I think the points that you're raising, Lauren, are legitimate, but life is, it's so complicated. And again, I am also concerned, and I don't deny, you know, the allegations that you're making, because I think they're true. So, you know, we have to hope that every little piece that we're doing positively is there, and that, in fact, in
Where is this
articulating
from?
these particular things,
Where'd you
we're
go?
expressing also a hope. So I'm going to stop the recording at this point, and we'll continue, God